The VIP section of the aircraft was quieter than the rest of the plane, wrapped in a soft hum of luxury and muted conversations. Leather seats gleamed under warm cabin lights, and flight attendants moved with rehearsed elegance. Marcus Reed sat calmly in his seat, hands folded, posture relaxed, eyes scanning the safety card without really reading it. He had flown this route dozens of times, often anonymously, preferring privacy over attention. Today was no different. He wore a simple blazer, no flashy watch, nothing that announced power. Just a man traveling like anyone else. Across the aisle, a white couple settled into their seats, chatting comfortably. Behind Marcus, a young woman leaned toward her companion, whispering while glancing in his direction. Marcus noticed, but ignored it. He had learned long ago not to react to every look. The plane doors were still open when a flight attendant stopped beside him. She was tall, composed, her smile tight and professional. "Sir," she said politely but firmly, "may I see your boarding pass?" Marcus handed it over without hesitation. She scanned it once, then again, her brow creasing. "There seems to be an issue," she said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "What kind of issue?" "This seat," she replied, lowering her voice, "is reserved for VIP passengers." Marcus nodded. "I'm aware." She glanced at him, then at the pass again. "You'll need to move to your assigned seat." Marcus remained calm. "That is my assigned seat." The attendant's smile thinned. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." A few nearby passengers shifted, listening openly now. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the quiet warning that something unnecessary was unfolding. "I booked this seat weeks ago," he said evenly. "There's no mistake." Before the attendant could respond, another flight attendant approached, whispering something into her ear. She nodded sharply. "Sir," she said louder now, "you're not listed as a VIP. We'll need this seat for someone else." Marcus glanced around. "For who?" The attendant gestured subtly toward the boarding door, where a well-dressed white man stood waiting impatiently, arms crossed. Marcus followed the gesture, then looked back at her. "That passenger can sit in his assigned seat," he said calmly. The attendant's expression hardened. "Sir, you're holding up the process." "I'm seated correctly," Marcus replied. The white passenger stepped closer now, annoyance written plainly on his face. "Is there a problem?" he asked, loud enough for others to hear. "Yes," the attendant said quickly. "We're resolving it." Marcus looked up at the man. "There's no problem," he said. "This is my seat," the man scoffed. "I doubt that." A murmur spread through the cabin. Someone chuckled nervously. Someone else shook their head. Marcus felt heat rise behind his eyes, but his voice remained steady. "You doubted based on what?" The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. The implication hung thick in the air. "Sir," the attendant snapped, losing patience, "I need you to stand up now." Marcus slowly unclipped his seatbelt but didn't rise. "I will not give up a seat I paid for," he said, "unless you can show me proof that I'm wrong." The second attendant crossed her arms. "This is first-class protocol." Marcus finally stood, towering slightly over both attendants. He kept his hands visible, his movements slow. "Then follow it," he said. "Check the manifest." The white passenger laughed softly. "Unbelievable." That word landed like a spark. Marcus felt every eye on him. He thought of his father, who had taught him early that respectability would not shield him from assumptions. He thought of boardrooms where he'd been mistaken for an assistant, of hotels where keys were a check, of meetings where surprise followed his introductions. The attendant reached for her radio. "We may need security," she said. The cabin went silent. Marcus inhaled deeply. "Before you do that," he said quietly, "I suggest you verify who I am." "And who exactly are you?" the white man asked. Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "I own this airline." Laughter erupted, sharp, disbelieving. "That's funny," the man said. "Real funny." Marcus turned to the attendant. "Call your supervisor," he said. "Now." The attendant hesitated, then spoke into her radio, irritation clear in her voice. Moments later, the supervisor arrived, a middle-aged woman with a practiced expression of authority. "What seems to be the issue?" she asked. "This passenger refuses to move," the attendant said quickly. "He's claiming to be someone he's not." The supervisor looked at Marcus. Marcus handed her his boarding pass and his phone. "Check the company directory," he said. She frowned. tapping on her tablet. Her face changed almost instantly. Color drained. Her posture stiffened. Silence swallowed the cabin. The supervisor looked up slowly. "Mr. Reed," she said carefully, "I apologize for the misunderstanding." The attendant's eyes widened. The white passenger's smile vanished. Marcus looked around the cabin, every face suddenly alert. "There was no misunderstanding," he said quietly. "There was an assumption." The plane stood, frozen, suspended in the weight of what had just been revealed. The supervisor's hands trembled slightly as she returned the phone to Marcus. "Sir," she said, voice lowered, "please accept our sincerest apologies. You are, of course, welcome to remain seated." The cabin stayed silent, stunned by the sudden reversal. The attendants who moments earlier had been so certain now avoided Marcus's eyes. One took a small step back, as if space itself might undo what had already happened. The white passenger stood frozen, face flushed, jaw tight, suddenly unsure where to look. Marcus sat back down slowly. "Thank you," he said, calm but unmistakably firm. "But I'd like to address what just occurred." The supervisor nodded, swallowing. "Of course." Marcus looked around the cabin. "I fly quietly. I don't announce who I am. I shouldn't have to. But what just happened wasn't about seating. It was about assumption." No one interrupted him. Even the hum of the plane felt muted. "You assumed I didn't belong here," Marcus continued. "You assumed I was lying. You assumed someone else deserved this seat more than I did. Not because of policy, because of perception." The white passenger shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I didn't know." Marcus raised a hand gently. "That's the point," he said. "You didn't know, yet you were confident." The man opened his mouth, then closed it again. His certainty had evaporated. The supervisor cleared her throat. "We will be filing a report immediately," she said. "This does not reflect our values." Marcus met her eyes. "Then make sure it doesn't happen again. To anyone." She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." The attendant stepped back into the aisle, visibly shaken. One whispered an apology, barely audible. Marcus acknowledged it with a nod, but nothing more. Apologies mattered. Accountability mattered more. As the plane prepared for departure, the energy in the cabin had changed. Passengers who had watched silently before now looked at Marcus with new expressions, some with respect, some with embarrassment, some with something like relief, as if a truth they'd avoided had finally been named for them. The engines roared to life, and the aircraft lifted into the sky. Marcus gazed forward, not out of pride, but reflection. He hadn't wanted a scene. He hadn't wanted recognition. He had wanted fairness. That shouldn't have required revelation. Midway through the flight, a senior attendant approached carefully. "Mr. Reed," she said softly, "may I offer you anything?" Marcus smiled politely. "Just a coffee, thank you," she returned promptly. Hands steady, demeanor changed. "Again," she said, "I'm sorry." Marcus accepted the cup. "Make it right when I'm not here," he replied. She nodded, understanding. Across the aisle, the white passenger stared out the window, arms crossed, quiet now. The seat beside him felt heavier than before, burdened by an unspoken lesson. When the plane landed, passengers disembarked slowly, many glancing at Marcus as they passed. A few nodded. One woman paused. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Marcus asked. "For saying what needed to be said." Marcus watched her walk away. Change didn't always come from speeches. Sometimes it came from refusing to move. At the gate, the supervisor approached once more. "Mr. Reed," she said, "the company will be reviewing training procedures immediately." "I hope so," Marcus replied, "because status shouldn't determine dignity." She nodded again, humble. Outside the jet bridge, Marcus finally allowed himself to exhale fully. The mask of calm slipped just enough for the weight to register. Moments like this never got easier. They only became more familiar. As he walked through the terminal, his phone buzzed. Messages from executives, from board members, from legal. He ignored them for now. This wasn't about corporate response. It was about human one. Later that evening, alone in his hotel room, Marcus sat by the window overlooking the city lights. He replayed the moment he'd spoken the words, "I own this airline," not with satisfaction, with necessity. He wondered how many others had been moved from seats, questioned, doubted, simply because no reveal was coming, because no title would arrive to force respect. That thought stayed with him. The next morning, Marcus drafted a directive: mandatory bias training, clear escalation protocols, anonymous reporting channels, not as optic as obligation. He knew policy alone wouldn't erase prejudice, but silence would guarantee it stayed. Before sending it, he paused, thinking of the faces in that cabin, of the laughter that had followed his truths, of the quiet that followed confirmation. He pressed send. That afternoon, news began to circulate quietly inside the company. Not headlines, not press releases, internal reckoning. Some resisted, some reflected, some understood immediately. Marcus didn't need applause. He needed progress. That night, as he boarded another flight, he took his seat without incident. No questions, no doubts, just a boarding pass, accepted at face value. He watched passengers settle in, unaware of how close dignity and disrespect often sat beside each other. As the plane took off, Marcus closed his eyes briefly, not in relief, in resolve, because belonging should never have to be proven, and power should never be the price of respect. Marcus sat back as the cabin lights dimmed, watching reflections blur against the window. The flight was smooth now, almost too calm compared to the tension still echoing in his chest. Moments like this never fully ended when the plane landed. They lingered, shaping how he entered every room afterward. Across the aisle, a young black man caught Marcus's eye and nodded subtly. Nothing dramatic, just recognition. Marcus returned it. He knew that look well. It carried questions, confirmation, and relief all at once. The remainder of the flight passed quietly, but Marcus's mind stayed active. He thought about how often power was mistaken for posture, confidence mistaken for threat, silence mistaken for guilt. He had learned to navigate those misunderstandings carefully, but he resented that he ever had to. When the aircraft finally reached the gate, Marcus waited until the aisle cleared. He rose without urgency, gathering his bag, moving with deliberate calm. The attendants stepped aside now, overly polite, hyper-aware. Their earlier certainty had dissolved into caution. As Marcus walked through the jet bridge, he overheard fragments of conversation behind him. "I can't believe that happened." "He handled it well." "Imagine if he wasn't who he said he was." That last comment struck deeper than the rest. Imagine if he wasn't. That was the truth at the center of it all. Respect had arrived only after revelation. Without it, the outcome would have been very different. In the terminal, Marcus paused briefly, watching people rush by with purpose and distraction. He wondered how many stories moved through this space unnoticed, how many moments of quiet injustice ended without resolution. Today had ended differently, but not because the system worked, because power had intervened. That realization unsettled him more than the confrontation itself. Later, alone, again, Marcus replayed the laughter that followed his claim. He understood it now. It wasn't disbelief alone. It was comfort, a belief that the world still made sense the way they expected it to, that people like him occupy predictable places. Disrupting that belief had shaken the room. He thought of younger versions of himself, sitting silently in spaces that doubted him. He thought of future passengers who wouldn't have a title to reveal, who would simply be told to move, comply, disappear. Marcus resolved that those stories mattered just as much. In the days that followed, changes began to ripple quietly. New training sessions, revised protocols, real conversations, uncomfortable ones. Some resisted, others listened. Progress arrived unevenly, but it arrived. Marcus didn't monitor every outcome. He didn't need to. His role wasn't to supervise guilt. It was to demand standards. Weeks later, on another flight, Marcus watched a different situation unfold. A misunderstanding, a raised voice, an attendant paused, recalibrated, checked the manifest properly. The moment they escalated, Marcus allowed himself a small breath of satisfaction, not victory, proof. As the plane climbed higher, he looked around the cabin, seeing it clearly now, not as a CEO, not as an exception, but as a space where dignity should be automatic, not earned through revelation. He knew change would never be instant, but he also knew moments like his had weight. They traveled, they taught, and somewhere on another flight, another passenger would remain seated. Simply because someone remembered what should have happened all along. That was enough.